Imagine this. Imagine that you're deep in a dimly lit cavern, your torch flickering as you traverse the underground labyrinth. The smell of dirt hits your nostrils, and the echoes of the distant water droplets reverberate across the roughly hewn walls as your party's fate hangs in the balance. Welcome back, my homies. This is the essence of what we're going to explore today, the art of bringing D&D scenes to life through vivid narration. I was watching The Nun 2 last night, and it got me thinking about a way I have always kind of practiced descriptive narration for games. I just can't be the only one out there that is constantly pondering the best way to describe scenes in D&D when watching movies, because after all, thinking about D&D is fun. So today let's talk about narration of scenes, a little bit about what makes a good narration, the scene description, the flavor text. And stick around because I'm going to go over a little bit of a mental exercise I use to practice describing scenes so they come alive to my players. If you are a DM who struggles to portray the feeling and emotion of these amazing scenes you have planned, then this one is for you. At its heart, the purpose of narration or flavor text is to paint a picture in the minds of your players. We, the dungeon masters, have all the answers behind our screens, but we don't want to just spell things out. We want to weave the scene around the characters and let them react to it, to live in it. But here's the catch. The players have the attention span of squirrels, and you need to keep them on the hook long enough to bring the scene to life. So when I think about the ideal way to narrate a scene, it needs to be intentional, emotional, and concise. Let's start with concise, or rather, how long is too long? Tables vary wildly. Some tables are avid, intent listeners looking to find those hidden clues in the spaces in between your words. And other tables are endless warmongering murder hobos who open a door looking for a fight or loot so they can fight better. Pay close attention to your players and gauge how much description they can handle before they zone out. If you see their eyes wandering or see their phones appearing in their hands, your descriptions are probably too long. Next, we want our narrations to be intentional. Our narrations of scenes should be designed with the intent to build out the necessary parts of the scene to our players. True story, in a not so distant game I was playing with some friends and we arrived at a hill overlooking a beach. The DM asked what we wanted to do. My character, a Grave Domain cleric, is a bit of a trickster, a bit of a daredevil. So when presented with a hill that we have to go down, my cleric wants to try and surf down it on a shield. Now that didn't end well because the hill the DM described looked like this in my mind, but was really more of a cliff that looked more like this. It ended up with a not so gracious fall down the hill, taking a pretty substantial amount of damage for a level 2 baby cleric that it was at the time. Now whether or not I was listening as well as I should have been, or the narration of the hill wasn't clear enough to paint a picture of the considerably dangerous descent is debatable, but regardless, I made a decision based on a perceived hill instead of a cliff. Now I was given the chance to retcon it once it became clear I greatly misjudged this cliff, but I tend to not retcon as a player much, leaving my own demise up to the chaos of the game and my own bad decisions. But no harm, no foul, I was a cleric after all. I stitched myself right up and onwards to a wild shipwreck just off the beach. Spoiler alert, Carl got eaten. Pour one out for Carl. So when we think about narration, we need to make sure we are narrating the parts specifically that must be known to our players. I think it's absolutely crucial that our players never fail because of lack of situational knowledge, or at least not the knowledge that should have been obvious to the character. And finally, moving on to my favorite, our narration should be emotional. Not like a romance or a tragedy of any of that gooey shit, but rather we should convey the feeling of a scene in a way our players can empathize with. You see, all scenes have some sort of emotion, some sort of feeling to them, that intangible energy that we sense, that impression that we get from an area that we're in. So much of the magic of D&D is either created or lost in this very element. Players getting a description of a cave but aren't given the feeling of being in a cave aren't really there. They aren't really seeing the world as their character would see it. So how do we nail the emotion of a scene? Well, what I do is view the scenes in my mind as if it was a movie scene. A dramatic movie scene showing the details of the environment with cool camera angles and pans around the area. And this is actually how I practice narration. I recommend you give it a go as well. When I'm watching a movie and I see a cool scene, a massive cathedral, an empty train station, or a bright and glittery casino floor, it's very obvious that the director shot these scenes this way to convey emotion about the scene. The director wants you to feel like you are there, much like we dungeon masters want our players to feel like they are there. So next time you are watching a movie, think about not just the plot, but how you would describe scenes that you are watching to your table, and make them feel like they can see it in their minds. Pick scenes that you love, ones that speak to you. Like a graveyard at night. What does it look like? How would you paint this picture? Would you describe the low-hanging fog nearly obscuring the ground at your feet? The moisture gathering on their armor? The top of the headstones emerging from the dense fog as the silhouettes of statues give their players the sense that they're being watched? What if your players find themselves in a frozen tundra environment? The massive mountains above them, the cold wind numbing their faces as they peer through the snow-speckled wind. In spite of the gentle but biting wind, the trees in the distance stand frozen in time, weighed by the previous night's heavy snow. Perhaps they stumble on a precarious rope bridge, perched high above a river teeming with menacing alligators. The bridge, clearly aged and weather-worn, bears the unmistakable marks of decay in its worn wooden planks. With each step across the bridge, the motion reverberates through the structure, sending ripples of motion cascading along its length. Thinking about scenes in your games like you're a movie director shooting it gives you a better perspective in order to bring it to life. So when you are stuck watching a movie that is otherwise a giant disappointment, entertain yourself by looking out for some interesting scenes and consider how you could paint that picture in your players' minds briefly, but with the information they need and how it feels to be there. That's it for this week, my fellow storytellers. Let me know in the comments how you practice your game master art, and be sure to subscribe. We have come so far and are so thankful for all of your support. Have a killer week, and I will see you guys next time.